In 1980, Atari had one single software engineer, who was female, that woman, Dona, whose only prior programming experience was assembling displays at General Motors, created the classic arcade title Centipede against enormous odds in a high-stakes environment. In the infancy of the gaming industry, as the keynote speaker at the Women in Games International Conference, she will share the lessons of her experience. Her advice for professional and aspiring female game designers, and her ideas for the unique role women can play in game design. Ahead of the conference, Gamasutra spoke with Ms. Bailey about some of these ideas, and discussed her challenging experience at Atari, where colleagues did not believe she could possibly be responsible for a Centipede, even after completed it. She discusses how treating programming as an extension of verbal language can bring greater artistic depth to the gaming medium, which she was not given the freedom to express at the time, and explains how the history-making Centipede might never even have been if not for a chance encounter with one song by the Pretenders. At the time you created Centipede, you were one of the only female game designers in the industry, and at a heavyweight like Atari, no less. Can you describe what that was like? I always say that it was the closest to being in a frat that I will ever be. When I started at Atari, there were probably around 30 game designers who were professionals of one sort or another. Either software engineers, or hardware engineers, or technicians. I was hired as the only software engineer who was a female. It was a ratio of 30 to 1, and by the time I left, it was about 120 to 1. Were you intimidated? Not intimidated, but it was really an interesting experience. It was my first exposure to this kind of situation. When you are the only person of a certain kind, you kind of lose your identity. It's really strange. It's not that I ever forgot I was female, but I would go for stretches where I would sort of forget. It had some good points, and it was kind of tough, though. I remember towards the end of the second year of it I was there. For 27 months after about 2 years, I remember thinking, I want to know what I am like again, on my own, by myself, without all of this around me. Did you feel additional pressure at the drawing board because of being female? Yeah, I think that there was a lot of additional pressure just by being the only female. I think I was watched a lot more than I could have been. I could have blended in a lot better, if not for that one thing. I think that my personality was quite a bit different, too. You never know what you did be like if you were male, and I never spent any time thinking, I wonder. But I do think that I have always been sort of introverted and quiet, and kind of shy, and all the things that, if I had not been female, would have allowed me to take a place in the back, and not in the line of vision all the time. I am an only child, and so it's kind of like that experience in my family growing up. It was kind of like the same thing there, whether I wanted to be stared at or not. I was not accustomed to extra attention in a professional setting, and it was definitely more than I'd ever been given. You have to do certain things to accommodate that, and I do not think I was fussed at understanding how to deal with it. Did things change once you did in Centipede? Yes, but I am not sure it was for the better. There was a lot of silly attention after that. It's not always popular to do something like that. The first thing that happened, I was not ready for at all, and I still have not figured out how to deal with this part. People just started. Why no? The typical kind of thing that people would say was, either it was a fluke, or I did not really do it. Somebody else did it. I am a very peaceful person, and I felt sick of fighting. so I really just disappeared. And I have not had contact with the industry for at least 20 years. Do you follow the industry at all? Now, I did not at all until about a year ago. I teach now, and I taught a special class for some very accelerated students who were the first ones accepted into the new game design program at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. They had done AP classes, and when I met them, I found out that they had all kinds of certifications, all kinds of things I did not expect, and they were very accelerated for the typical students who I teach. And so I was really glad I did spend the summer doing a lot of preparation, so I was up on all the game genres, and spent a lot of time reading game developer, and all kinds of things. So through reading, that's my biggest connection. It's interesting, one of the first things I realized was that Centipede would be considered, at best, a casual game now, which was so funny to me, because it was not that at all. It was an action game with a story, and now it really does not have a narrative at all by today's standards. It probably would not even be released today. All of those things were interesting to me when I was going through this period of discovery. In the following essay, the leading technical artist of Naki's Russian development partner Banzi Games, Roman Tursky, describes the rendering process and the materials used for the characters' equipment in the mobile game Shadow Fight 3. In addition, he reviews some of the tricks used for setting up the environment. Shadow Fight 3 is an RPG action game developed on the basis of the unit engine. The game was released on iOS and Android in November 2017, and since then the number of installations has exceeded 50 million. To reach such a large audience, the development team had to perform well in optimizing the game, and as a result of their efforts, the game runs at 60 frames per second on most modern devices. Journalists and players often praise the visuals of Shadow Fight 3. In this article, I will give you insight under the surface of the game and reveal how we managed to achieve this visual quality, rendering a frame. There are many factors that directly affect the performance of the game and the number of frames it can display per second. One of the most important factors for us was the number of jaw calls used per one frame in the game. Let's take a closer look at the concept. During the rendering of a game frame, of each static group of objects sharing the same material, Unity uses jaw calls and overlays them on each other. Each jaw call requires CPU resources, so an important step in optimization is to reduce the number of these calls. Our goal was to minimize the number of calls to 100 per game frame on average. This GIF shows how a single frame is rendered. The first step of rendering in Shadow Fight 3 is drawing the dynamic shadows of the characters and the glow effects for the luminous elements on the armor and weapons of the characters. Both of these processes have their own peculiarities and they should be explained in detail. Shadows, in addition to the main camera used for the main frame, an additional orthographic camera projector is installed on the scene, designed to draw the shadows from the characters onto a separate surface we call a shadow receiver. This camera follows the midpoint between the opponents and creates their projection onto the plane, based on their current position. The result takes the form of an alpha texture, which replaces the same texture with the rendered result of the previous frame in the dynamic material of the shadow receiver object. This approach helps us to avoid the need to calculate real shadows and draw them on all models in the location, which would have a significant effect on the overall performance. Shadow receiver surface. For this frame, The process took 20 render calls. Glow. The process of creating a glow effect on the armor and the weapons of the characters is similar to the process of creating dynamic shadows. A blur cup is created around the model with luminous elements. Glow effects are projected on its airframe. Based on information stored in the blue channel of the RGB texture of the material of the glowing object. That means the blue channel acts as a mask. Projecting the glow. You will see more about this below. In the section about character materials, the blur is applied and the information is saved as an alpha texture, which replaces the texture with the result for the previous framing. The dynamic blur cup material. Blur cup. In this frame, the glow process calculation took 15 draw calls. Please do more to blur the effect.